The quietness of Pine Valley Estates was the kind that wrapped around you like a soft blanket, deceptively comforting, almost too perfect. It was the kind of place where every lawn looked like it was trimmed with a ruler, where mailboxes stood like uniformed soldiers, and the air smelled faintly of jasmine and control. I had barely begun to unpack the last of my boxes when I noticed her, clipboard in hand, posture stiff as a starched collar, eyes that scanned like a barcode reader. She introduced herself as Karen Fitzgerald, the HOA president. The way she said it, you'd think she was announcing her candidacy for Congress. She didn't welcome me. She inspected me, pointed at my grass, and declared it an inch over regulation. Warned me that my mailbox wasn't the approved shade of colonial blue. I smiled politely, brushing it off. After all, I had moved here for peace. A quiet escape from city noise and the chaos of daily IRS field operations. I thought I'd left the madness behind. But little did I know, it had followed me in a pastel sweater and sensible shoes. She lingered too long, asked too many questions. Not just the casual neighborly kind, but the calculated ones. What did I do for work? Was I always home? Did I receive a lot of official-looking mail? I gave her vague answers about working in finance, watching her eyes light up with a gleam I knew too well. That glint, the one criminals get right before they think they've found their mark. That moment, that interaction, it wasn't just a bad neighborly encounter. It was the spark that lit a firestorm. I had no idea the quiet cul-de-sac I chose would become ground zero for one of the most complex tax fraud cases I'd ever touch. It started like a whisper. Harmless. Unremarkable. An envelope here. A name I didn't recognize there. At first I assumed it was a fluke. A simple case of mail mix-up. Maybe the previous owner hadn't updated their address. But as the weeks wore on, the volume grew. Credit card offers to names I'd never heard of. Pre-approved loan letters for ghost borrowers. And then, the thing that made my stomach drop, a refund check from the IRS for $8,000 made out to someone named Robert Chun, addressed to my home. That was the moment the world tilted. My brain kicked into a mode I knew well, pattern recognition, detail analysis, fraud detection. This wasn't just random. This was methodical. And whoever was behind it was good. Real good. But not good enough. I pulled out the training I'd used in years of IRS fieldwork. Set up a small, hidden security camera, nestled perfectly behind the decorative plant at my front steps. Ironically, a plant placed there under Karen's strict landscaping guidelines. Every morning, just as the sun cracked the horizon, I reviewed the footage. And every morning, like clockwork, there she was. Karen, in her power walker sneakers, leash in one hand, coffee in the other, pausing in front of my mailbox with the precision of someone punching in a time card. She'd take pictures. Sometimes, she'd flip through my mail like it was her personal magazine. Twice, she even reached in and slipped envelopes into her pocket before strolling away as if nothing happened. I sat there night after night, watching the footage, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck rise. This wasn't suburban nosiness. This was predation. My house had become a drop point in a much bigger operation, and the predator was hiding behind HOA bylaws and garden club meetings. When you've been in the field long enough, you learn to listen to your gut. My gut was screaming. I pulled records. Quietly. Carefully. I didn't want to tip my hand. I ran confidential searches through IRS databases, digging for anomalies. The deeper I went, the colder my blood ran. 17 different tax returns, 17, had been filed using my address over the last 12 months. Not in my name. Not even in the name of the person who owned the home before me. All of them listed different aliases, different business losses, inflated charitable donations, fabricated dependents. Each return calculated perfectly to fly just under the radar. Enough to get flagged if someone like me was watching, but subtle enough to evade auto-detection. The total attempted refunds were astronomical. Over $200,000. I traced IP addresses. Multiple states. Different cities. Some returns filed from hotels, others from public libraries. But the common denominator? My address. My quiet little house in Pine Valley Estates had become the nerve center for a sophisticated scam. I knew then what I was looking at wasn't just some desperate single fraudster. This was an operation. Organized. Rehearsed. And if Karen was the point of contact on my end, that meant she was either the puppet or the puppeteer. I wanted to believe it was the former, but something about that smile of hers told me she was pulling the strings. Still, I held back. 20 years in this line of work had taught me the most powerful weapon isn't force, it's patience. And I was going to let her hang herself with the rope she thought I didn't even see. So I made my move, not directly, not yet. I filed a formal complaint, triggered the internal gears of the federal machine. Within days, black Suburbans arrived, windows tinted, tires silent on the pristine asphalt. A team of agents, dressed as surveyors and neighborhood auditors, began canvassing the community. They played it slow, strategic. Started on the outskirts of Pine Valley, gathering intel, smiling politely, making notes about property tax alignment and standard mail distribution. But each step brought them closer to Karen. And with each step, Karen changed. The woman who once strutted around with the arrogance of an empress began to crumble. Her 6:15 a.m. mail raid stopped cold. She started watching them from her window, blinds barely cracked, her dog no longer walked, her clipboard nowhere in sight. At the next HOA meeting, her usual air of superiority had vanished. She fumbled the agenda, misquoted bylaws, forgot the names of board members she once ruled like pawns. And it wasn't just her demeanor. It was the shifting dynamics around her. Her so-called allies on the board began backing away, citing sudden travel plans or work obligations. Her husband, a man I hadn't seen outside their house in weeks, suddenly ND-manufactured respectability crumbled like a sandcastle in a storm. And in that single moment, justice met arrogance. Her smirk was gone. Her mask was off. And everything she thought she could control was now slipping through her trembling fingers. Began arguing with her in public, his voice raised, face flushed. It was like watching a queen lose her crown in slow motion. And I stayed silent. I watched. I waited. Every day more evidence gathered. And every day, she didn't know that the man she thought she'd targeted was quietly drawing the net tighter around her. The day it all came crashing down felt almost cinematic. I was sipping coffee by my window when 3 black SUVs pulled up in front of her house, tires crunching softly on the driveway. Agents in black suits stepped out, badges flashing in the early morning light. Warrant in hand, they walked straight to her door. She opened it, confused at first, then panicked. Voices rose. Doors slammed. And for 2 hours, they scoured her pristine home. When they emerged, they were carrying boxes, laptops, files, hard drives, bundles of documents. Karen followed them out, her face pale, hands trembling, her carefully styled hair unraveling with every step. But the moment that burned itself into my memory was when they brought her to me. Agent Sullivan, tall and calm, escorted her across the street, her eyes wide with disbelief. When she saw me standing there, IRS badge now gleaming on my belt, it was as if every lie she had told, every illusion of control, shattered all at once. Her lips parted in silent horror. She actually stumbled backward, needing Agent Sullivan to steady her. Her empire of petty power, fraudulent wealth, The evidence lay in trembling piles across my dining room table, transforming the heart of my home into an impromptu war room where truth cannonied through every printed page and blinking hard drive. Agent Sullivan and his team spread out flash drives, annotated spreadsheets, and thick envelopes stamped with the stark formality of federal subpoenas. I watched Karen's face as each item surfaced. First came the forged W-2 templates, document after document showcasing non-existent employers and phantom wages. Every field immaculate, every signature a lie. Then the screenshots, Karen's pale hands, rings glittering, poised on a keyboard as she manually altered line items in slick tax prep software. When the video from my hidden mailbox camera began to play, her pawing through my letters at dawn, she recoiled as if seeing a stranger wearing her skin. Her lawyer tried to object, his voice cracking in the close air, but Agent Sullivan's calm narration marched on. A USB was inserted. Up popped a chat log where Karen coached an accomplice on maximizing fake charitable deductions. Another click revealed a color-coded spreadsheet mapping out the neighborhood. Green for vacant, yellow for frequent travelers, red for active drop points, my address gleaming like a bullseye. Each revelation was a hammer, and with every strike Karen's composure splintered. Her breathing hitched, her manicured nails scraped furrows in the table's finish. Tears blurred the mascara she'd probably applied on autopilot that morning. When the recording of her phone call surfaced, her voice dripping triumph as she boasted to her sister, "I make more in one refund cycle than Gerald makes all year." The dam burst. She lurched forward, fingers splayed like a drowning swimmer grasping at air, sobbing out a desperate confession. She spoke of a single favor for a cash-strapped relative morphing into a side hustle. then a full-scale enterprise fueled by greed and the intoxicating thrill of playing puppet master. Her words fell in ragged spurts, regret, justification, self-pity, until the weight of silence pressed the room flat. And in that silence hung the undeniable truth. The facade was shattered, and the architect herself was begging for a way out of the ruins she'd built. What unspooled next was the anatomy of an invisible empire. A criminal lattice Karen had woven through back fences and book club whispers until it blanketed Pine Valley estates in a net of deceit. It began, she said, with her sister's overdue bills. One false return that sailed through unnoticed. Emboldened, she mapped the quiet streets, memorizing which homes sat empty during ski season, which retirees forwarded mail, which young families traveled for soccer tournaments. She weaponized the mundane. Neighborly gossip became surveillance. Holiday cookie exchanges camouflaged strategy sessions. Soon she enlisted her hairdresser, then her Pilates instructor, anyone who craved a risk-free windfall. Each recruit received a customized tutorial. How to claim phantom business losses, how to stagger filings so refund checks never overlapped in one mailbox, how to funnel the proceeds through prepaid debit cards washed clean at distant ATMs. Karen kept 40% for management, but more importantly, she held the reins. She knew every participant's secrets, affairs, debts, addictions, and leveraged that knowledge like a mob boss clutching ledgers of sin. She coached them to clear browser histories, to file late at night when IRS traffic ebbed, to mask IP addresses through hotel Wi-Fi or cafes off the interstate. Like any syndicate, she instituted penalties. Miss a drop-off time, lose your cut, question her authority, find HOA citations piling up like autumn leaves. Standing in my dining room, she admitted she felt invincible. Camouflaged by manicured lawns and PDA bake sales, certain nobody in suburbia would suspect racketeering. She'd even bragged during neighborhood barbecues about knowing all the shortcuts in tax software, disguising criminal mastery as suburban savvy. Listening to her recount the machinery of exploitation, I felt a chill. She hadn't just bent the rules. She'd orchestrated a symphony of theft, conducting ordinary people until they drowned out their own moral compass with the sweet music of easy money. The hammer of justice fell in a fluorescent-lit courtroom thick with the musk of polished wood and nervous sweat, where a federal judge known for eviscerating white-collar criminals presided like an unblinking hawk. The prosecution painted Karen not as a misguided neighbor, but as the spine of an organized criminal enterprise that siphoned more than $2 million from public coffers. Line by line, statute by statute, they layered charges: mail fraud, wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, until the indictment read like a grim litany. But it was the invocation of RICO that truly detonated. Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. The same sword swung against mob families now poised over a suburban HOA president. The prosecutor outlined hierarchy, recruitment tactics, interstate transactions through the postal system. Each element ticking the boxes that transformed Karen's side hustle into racketeering. Defense counsel tried to cast her as overwhelmed, a housewife seduced by easy cash, but the evidence towered too high. The judge's voice, measured, resonant, confirmed enhancements for leadership role, abuse of trust, sophisticated means, and number of victims. Minimum 25 years. Potential 35. Fines eclipsing $1.2 million. Mandatory asset forfeiture. The colonial-style home, the retirement accounts, the SUV purchased outright with fraudulent refunds. Karen's shoulders buckled. The murmurs from the gallery, neighbors clutching court summonses as victims, rose like distant thunder. A gavel struck, and with that crisp crack the myth of untouchable suburbia fractured. What echoed wasn't merely legal judgment, but a cultural verdict. That power, unchecked, metastasizes. That greed, when dressed in pastel sweater sets, can still rot a community from its white picket inside out. Fallout swept through Pine Valley estates like a winter storm that spares no roof, leaving even the mightiest oaks stripped bare. Gerald, once the invisible accountant, became a spectral figure on moving day streets, boxing up his life while avoiding neighbors' eyes. He filed for divorce within 48 hours, citing irreconcilable betrayal, and offered to testify for leniency in his own tax practice review. Children whispered on sidewalks about the mail-stealing lady, their parents shushing them while secretly refreshing news feeds. The HOA board dissolved in scandal. Special elections were scheduled under federal oversight to ensure no residue of corruption lingered in community governance. For sale signs sprouted as homeowners, fearing plummeting property values, attempted to outrun the story before it headlined nightly news. Some couldn't sell, instead they stayed, installing security cameras and double-locking mailboxes, living with the uneasy knowledge that safety isn't an address but a vigilance. Local businesses quietly dropped Karen's name from customer appreciation plaques, scraping off the gilded letters like erasing a curse. Even after the moving trucks hauled away her furniture under Marshall's supervision, the house stood empty and silent, a monument to shattered trust. Grass grew long, weeds cracked driveway seams. And each time residents drove past the neglected colonial at the cul-de-sac's end, they were confronted by the cautionary silhouette of their own complacency. A reminder that evil doesn't always roar. Sometimes it bakes casseroles and waves from porch swings. As months turned to seasons, I often reflected on the fragile line between vigilance and paranoia, on how quickly neighborly fences morph into battlements when faith is broken. Yet something resilient took root in the aftermath. Block party grills fired again, but with deeper conversation replacing small talk. Elderly residents found volunteers to collect mail while they traveled. Young families formed watch groups that were more about fellowship than suspicion. The tale of the fallen HOA tyrant and the undercover IRS agent became local legend, told over bonfires as a modern parable. That arrogance can topple empires, that quiet observation can be the sharpest sword, and that communities thrive not on uniform lawns but on shared responsibility. For me, the experience etched a final lesson. You can't choose who lives across the street, but you can choose the spine you show when darkness creeps next door. And so, each dawn when the mailbox clanks shut and the jasmine breeze carries promise instead of dread, I breathe in the hard-won truth. Integrity, though silent, is armor, and justice, though patient, never sleeps. She wasn't always a tyrant. That's what stunned most of the longtime residents the most. When Karen Fitzgerald first moved into Pine Valley Estates with her husband Gerald 8 years ago, she was almost charming, if overly eager. She baked welcome muffins, handed out business cards for her husband's accounting firm, and spoke with a soft kind of persuasion that felt maternal, even nurturing. She ran for a position on the HOA board claiming she wanted to preserve the character and value of the neighborhood, and no one thought twice about it. But beneath the potlucks and seasonal wreaths, Karen had a knack for strategy. In less than 2 years, she climbed to HOA president, not through votes of admiration, but by outmaneuvering her rivals with whispers, manipulated complaints, and just enough truth laced into her rumors to poison reputations. She made herself indispensable while sowing distrust in others. Once she had control, the shift was immediate. She implemented fines that felt absurd, $100 for weeds, $200 for a misaligned trash bin, $300 if your flag wasn't hung at the proper angle. One family was fined because their child's bike was visible from the curb for more than 2 continuous hours. Residents whispered about her, but rarely challenged her. You see, Karen had created an environment of fear, where any defiance brought swift, humiliating punishment disguised as regulation enforcement. But it wasn't just her iron grip on aesthetics that made her dangerous. She developed a fascination with people's mail, what they ordered when they traveled, who sent them checks. She wasn't just maintaining order. She was harvesting data. She monitored patterns. She learned which neighbors vacationed often, who lived alone, who received IRS envelopes or bank statements. She weaponized that information slowly, incrementally, like a spider weaving a web tight enough to hold prey in place without them ever realizing they were trapped. The day I moved in, I was a fresh target in her eyes. Another solitary man, boxes stacked on the porch, no family around, and a job that I described in vague terms. She probably imagined me as a consultant, maybe a freelancer, someone financially comfortable but aloof, someone who wouldn't notice if the mail was tampered with or questioned why a few pieces went missing. She came by that first day with fake concern painted across her face. Asked if I lived alone, if I traveled often, if anyone came by to check on me. Red flags, every single one, and each one flapping loudly in the back of my mind. I gave vague answers and watched her take mental notes. She smiled too much. Her questions were too rehearsed. It wasn't neighborly curiosity. It was a data collection mission. I knew at the moment she glanced at the stack of mail on my kitchen table. She wasn't hiding her interest well. But instead of pushing back or warning her off, I chose a different route. I played the fool. Let her think she was smarter. Let her believe I was just another naive suburban transplant with a complicated job and no time to notice the little things. That was the rope I let her tie for herself, day by day, letter by letter. I watched how she moved, when she walked her dog, when she peered over fences. She wasn't just nosy. She was mapping her next fraudulent tax cycle like a general mapping terrain. She had done this before. And what she didn't know was that her quiet little operation had just trespassed into the territory of someone trained to take down people exactly like her. The more we investigated, the more her greed showed itself, not just in the spreadsheets or the bank deposits, but in the way she operated like she was untouchable. Karen didn't stop at vacant homes. That was where she started, filing a couple of returns using addresses that had been listed for sale, houses in transition. But that thrill wore off quickly. She needed more. So she recruited people. Her hairdresser, her book club friends, even a former colleague of her husband's. She ran it like a pyramid scheme wrapped in manicured charm. She taught them how to fabricate fake businesses, how to claim losses for consulting that never happened, how to invent charitable donations that looked legitimate. She showed them how to time the refund filings to avoid raising flags. Then she took a cut, always the bigger cut. 60% for her, 40% for them. She didn't just provide the addresses. She managed the entire operation. She tracked who got what, how much they owed her, and even had backup drop points in case someone moved or got suspicious. My address had been the gold mine. She had been using it before I even moved in, and once I did, she figured I was just another cog in her machine, too busy to notice or question. She watched me for weeks, testing, adjusting. She got cocky. She expected a $23,000 refund to arrive any day. That was the morning I caught her on camera one last time, standing at my mailbox, flipping through envelopes like she owned them. She didn't realize the trap was set, that the refund she so desperately wanted was the one that would blow her entire operation wide open. She had built a criminal empire on borrowed addresses, stolen identities, and blind confidence. And in her arrogance, she'd chosen the worst possible person to steal from. The evidence mounted like a tidal wave with no shore in sight. My camera was just the beginning. As news of the investigation spread, other neighbors came forward. 3 had installed cameras after packages disappeared. 1 had kept old mail that didn't belong to them, mail they now realized was part of the scheme. Surveillance footage, screenshots, bank records. All of it painted the same damning picture. Karen wasn't just dipping her toes into fraud. She was swimming in it. Her accounts showed deposits made within days of refund checks being issued. Her phone contained messages between her and her team, talking about deadlines, drop addresses, how to keep the IRS off their scent. 1 file had photos of fake IDs. Another had a list of return filing strategies. But the nail in the coffin? A voice memo. A smug recording of Karen bragging to her sister. These people don't even know what I'm doing. Mail fraud's easy when you've got a clipboard and a smile. And then came the spreadsheet, the neighborhood-wide tracking system with my address marked active reliable. Even her lawyer, a meek young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, began shaking his head in defeat. The prosecutor was relentless. Each exhibit was a punch to the gut. And by the end of it, even Gerald, her husband, had nothing left to say. He filed for divorce the next morning and offered a full statement to the federal agents. He looked hollow, betrayed, embarrassed, angry. Karen had tried to manipulate everyone, even the people she claimed to care about, into serving her fraudulent kingdom. And now, every string she'd pulled had snapped, leaving her tangled in the wreckage. When the charges were finally read aloud in court, you could feel the air change. 112 counts in total. Mail fraud, identity theft, filing false returns, racketeering, abuse of trust. For each count, years stacked like bricks in a wall she could never climb over. The judge was cold but fair, and he didn't flinch when sentencing guidelines were presented. 25 years minimum. More likely, 30 to 35. Fines totaling over $1.2 million. Restitution for every victim. Asset forfeiture of her house, vehicles, and accounts. Karen sat motionless, her mouth slack, her eyes red and puffy. When the RICO charges were confirmed, her composure broke completely. She shook her head, muttering, "No, no, no," over and over like it would rewind time. She clawed at the table, shaking as the numbers sank in. She would be in her 70s if she ever got out. Her community would never welcome her again. Her empire was gone, replaced by a federal cell and a number. But for everyone she harmed, for the lives she disrupted, the trust she shattered, justice had finally been served. Not with vengeance, not with cruelty, but with the quiet, calculated precision of truth catching up to a lie. And in that moment, as she sobbed and gasped, there was no HOA title, no suburban kingdom. Just a woman who gambled everything for power and lost it all.